Have you ever felt the weight of a world that just seems off? A reality where heavenly promises ring hollow and truth hides behind veils of dogma and tradition? Imagine a time, millennia ago, where this sense of disconnection wasn't just personal angst, but the very fabric of existence. A time where the heavens seemed made of brass and the voice of the divine, if it existed at all, was silenced by a chorus of false deities and soulless rituals. This is the setting where we find Elijah, not the prophet you know from Sunday school, but a man on the cusp of an awakening, a seeker of a deeper truth that the dominant system desperately tried to suppress. Elijah lived in a kingdom suffocated by idolatry, not just the worship of Baal, the deity of fertility and storm, but a more insidious idolatry, that of the very system that proclaimed itself divine. The rains had ceased, not just from the sky, but from the soul of the people. The cracked earth mirrored the spiritual barrenness, but for Elijah this drought was more than a punishment, it was a revelation. It was proof that the God who demanded sacrifices and blind obedience was in fact a limiting force, a builder of prisons, a distant and distorted echo of the true source. He felt, deep within him, that the Creator who revealed himself in storm and fire was a being of power, yes, but a power that imprisoned, not liberated. A power that demanded submission, not gnosis. The inciting incident for Elijah wasn't a divine command to confront Ahab, but a whisper that came from within, from a spark he barely understood, but which burned with a light different from that of the temples and altars. It was the voice of gnosis, the innate knowledge of his true origin, refusing to be silenced by the cacophony of the world's lies. He observed the priests of Baal in their frenzied ecstasies and saw in them not devotion but servitude to an illusion. He saw the people hungry and desperate, seeking answers from a God who was in essence a reflection of the demiurge, the cosmic architect who, in his imperfection, created this material world and proclaimed himself the only God, trapping souls in bodies and in ignorance. His first great insight, his first gnosis, came in the quiet of the wilderness, far from the clamor of crowds and the pomp of temples. It wasn't a thundering voice, but a subtle understanding. The true divine does not dwell in temples made by human hands, nor does it manifest in external rituals. It resides within, a spark of light imprisoned in the darkness of matter. Prayer, he realized, wasn't a plea to a distant God, but an activation of this spark, a resonance with the pleroma, the fullness of light, of which we are all fragments. The fire he sought wasn't the fire that consumes sacrifices, but the fire of consciousness that burns away illusions and reveals truth. He began to see the world not as the perfect creation of a benevolent God, but as a flawed construct, a labyrinth, designed to keep souls captive, governed by archons, cosmic entities that feed on human ignorance and fear. Elijah, then, was not a prophet in the traditional sense, but an initiate. He was beginning to see the code behind the matrix of reality. The drought, the famine, the idolatry, all were symptoms of a deeper disconnection, of humanity having forgotten its true divine nature and bowing to an inferior power, the demiurge, who masqueraded as the supreme God. The law that governed Israel, with its rules and punishments, was, for Elijah, another tool of the demiurge's control, designed to maintain order in his imperfect creation rather than guide souls to liberation. The true law was that of gnosis, of self-knowledge leading to knowledge of the divine. The call to adventure for Elijah wasn't an invitation to restore faith in a tribal god, but to unmask the illusion, to show that the power manifesting in the world was not the supreme power, but a shadow. He felt the urgency to expose the truth, to awaken those who were asleep in ignorance. The battle on Mount Carmel, which was approaching, would not just be a confrontation between prophets, but a cosmic demonstration, an opportunity to reveal that the fire of the true divine, the fire of gnosis, was infinitely more potent than any manifestation of the demiurge. It was an invitation to the audience, both of his time and today, to question imposed narratives, to feel the whisper of the divine spark within themselves, and to embark on their own journey of awakening. The age of blind faith was ending. The age of inner knowledge was about to begin. With the spark of gnosis ignited within him, Elijah embarked on a journey that would take him far beyond the borders of Israel, and even deeper into the recesses of existence itself. His quest was not for land or treasure, but for knowledge. The forbidden knowledge that would unravel the true nature of reality and the origin of his own soul. He knew that the material world, with its rigid laws and apparent solidity, was merely a shadow, a projection of the demiurge, the imperfect creator who proclaimed himself God. The true reality, the pleroma, the fullness, lay beyond, accessible, only to those who dared to look past the veil. His journey led him to ancient texts, whispered in secret among the few who still guarded the flame of the original truth. He studied fragments of forgotten wisdom, deciphering codes and symbols that pointed to a cosmology far more complex than that taught in the temples. Elijah learned about the archons, the cosmic rulers, the jailers of matter, who stood between humanity and the pleroma. They were the guardians of illusions, the architects of false doctrines, those who fed on ignorance and fear. The drought that plagued the land was not merely a natural phenomenon, it was a manifestation of the archon's suffocating control, draining the vitality from the world and the human soul. Elijah was not alone in his quest, though most of his encounters were with shadows and echoes of a nearly extinct truth. He found mentors in unexpected places, in hermits living on the fringes of society, in secret communities preserving ancient rituals, in whispers from travelers who had glimpsed other worlds. Each encounter was a step deeper into the labyrinth, each new revelation an Ariadne's thread guiding him out of the darkness. He learned that prayer as he knew it was a tool of the demiurge to maintain submission. True Gnostic prayer was an invocation, a resonance with the pleroma, a way to manifest the divine spark within, to dismantle the archontic structures. But the quest was not without its dangers. Skepticism was the least of them. The real danger came from the archons themselves, who did not wish for humanity to awaken. They manifested as voices of doubt, as temptations of worldly power, as veiled threats through their human servants, the false prophets and priests of the system. Elijah faced mockery, persecution, and loneliness. He was tested in his faith, not in blind faith in an external God, but in faith in his own gnosis, in his ability to discern truth behind illusion. With each obstacle, his understanding deepened. The world was not just imperfect. It was a prison, and the only key was inner knowledge. He understood that the battle on Mount Carmel would not be a power struggle between gods, but a demonstration of the supremacy of gnosis over ignorance. The 450 prophets of Baal were not merely idolaters. They were, in their blindness, agents of the demiurge, keeping the people captive in a cycle of empty rituals and superficial beliefs. Elijah, on the other hand, represented freedom, the autonomy of the soul that reconnects with its true origin. He was preparing for an act of cosmic magic, an invocation that would not ask a god to act, but would activate the power of the pleroma through his own divine spark. The fire prayer was not a plea but a declaration, a manifestation of the truth he had discovered in his quest. He was about to show the world that true fire does not come from a distant heaven, but from within, burning away illusions and revealing the hidden light. Mount Carmel was not merely a mountain, it was a cosmic stage, a convergence point where the illusions of the demiurge would be confronted by the light of gnosis. On one side, the 450 prophets of Baal, in their ritualistic frenzy, invoking an entity that was, in essence, a distorted reflection of the creative power, an archon feeding on blind faith and submission. On the other, Elijah, alone yet connected to a source of power far older and truer, the pleroma, the fullness of light, residing beyond the archontic spheres. The drought plaguing the land was the physical manifestation of the spiritual barrenness, imposed by a system that had imprisoned true divinity. Elijah's challenge was not a test of strength between gods, but a demonstration of the difference between exoteric, external faith and esoteric, internal gnosis. The prophets of Baal cried out, cut themselves, danced, seeking a response from a god who to Elijah was merely a projection of human ignorance, a puppet of the demiurge. The silence that followed their pleas was not the absence of a god, but the impotence of an illusion. The demiurge, in his limitation, could not manifest true fire, true life, for he himself was an inferior creation, a pale reflection of the original source. Then Elijah approached, not with shouts or frenzy, but with the calm of one who possesses knowledge. He rebuilt the altar not for an external god, but as a symbol of inner alignment, of the soul's reconnection with its divine origin. The water poured over the sacrifice was not merely to wet the wood, it was a symbol of purification, of washing away the illusions and false beliefs that obscured gnosis. And then Elijah uttered his fire prayer, a profound invocation that resonated not with a distant deity, but with the very core of the pleroma within him. O hidden light, source of all being, beyond the demiurge and his archons, hear the resonance of this awakened spark within me. Let the true fire of gnosis descend, not to consume flesh, but to burn away the veils of illusion, to expose the falsehoods of this material realm. Let this sacred flame ignite the dormant truth in every soul present, revealing the path back to the fullness. Manifest your presence not through external power, but through the inner revelation that shatters all chains. Let the heavens move not by command, but by the awakening of consciousness. And the fire descended. But it was not the fire that burns flesh and bone. It was the fire of gnosis, a manifestation of light and consciousness that consumed not only the sacrifice but the illusions hovering over Mount Carmel. This fire was not punitive, it was revelatory. It burned away lies, ignorance, the spiritual blindness that held the people captive. The fire that descended was visible proof that true power resides not in the external manifestations of a controlling God, but in the inner connection to the source. It was a wait-at-what moment for all present, a twist that unmasked the farce of the demiurge and his archons. Baal's prophets were exposed in their impotence. The people, once divided and confused, witnessed the truth. The rain that followed was not just a relief from physical drought. It was a rain of gnosis, an outpouring of knowledge that fertilized the soul and washed away the impurities of ignorance. The story of Mount Carmel, through this Gnostic lens, becomes the narrative of a man who, through his inner knowledge and connection to the pleroma, challenged and unmasked the archontic forces governing the material world, opening the eyes of those ready to see the true light. The moral and spiritual tension reached its peak, the choice between submission to a false god and liberation through inner knowledge. Elijah had revealed the truth, and the stakes had never been higher. The revelation on Mount Carmel was a cosmic earthquake, but the demiurge and his archons would not yield easily. Truth, once manifested, threatened the very structure of their prison. Jezebel, the queen who personified the tyranny of the material, world and spiritual blindness, became the embodiment of archontic fury. Her persecution of Elijah was not just personal revenge, it was the desperate reaction of the system against one who had dared to expose its fragility. Elijah, the bearer of gnosis, became public enemy number one of the status quo, a fugitive in his own world. His flight into the wilderness to Mount Horeb was not an act of cowardice, but a strategic retreat. In Gnosticism, the wilderness is often a place of purification and encounter with the inner divine, far from the distractions and corruption of the material world. There, Elijah did not seek refuge from an external god, but deepened his connection with the pleroma. The voice he heard was not in the wind, the earthquake, or the fire, manifestations of the demiurge's raw power, but in the still, small voice, the voice of inner gnosis, the confirmation of his true nature and mission. It was the moment of his existential crisis, where human fragility met the strength of revealed truth. This period of isolation and deepening insight was crucial. Elijah understood that the final battle would not be fought with swords or rituals, but on the plane of consciousness. Jezebel's persecution was a last-ditch attempt by the archons to drag him back into illusion, to make him doubt the truth he had discovered. But Elijah, now a master of gnosis, was beyond their reach. He had transcended fear, doubt, and the need for external validation. His soul, illuminated by the fire of knowledge, was ready to break free from the shackles of the material world. The climax of Elijah's journey, His ascension in a chariot of fire is the ultimate metaphor for Gnostic liberation. It was not a literal rapture to a physical heaven, but the disintegration of his material form and the ascent of his soul, his divine spark, back to the pleroma, the fullness of light. The chariot of fire and the horses of fire are symbols of the power of Gnosis that propelled him out of the sphere of influence of the demiurge and his archons. He did not die, he transcended. He was not taken, he liberated himself. It was the final triumph of knowledge over ignorance, of light over darkness, of the soul over matter. This decisive moment, Elijah's death and ascension, is irrefutable, proof that Gnosis offers a path to liberation from the cycle of rebirth and suffering imposed by the demiurge. He left behind his mantle, a symbol of his authority and knowledge, for Elisha, his successor, who would now carry the torch of Gnosis. The story of Elijah in this light is not just about a prophet who defied a king, but about a soul that defied the very structure of reality, found the hidden truth, and through it achieved ultimate liberation. It is an invitation for each of us to seek that same liberation, to recognize the divine spark within us, and to use the fire of Gnosis to burn away the illusions that imprison us. Elijah's story, when viewed through the lens of Gnosis, transcends time and religion, becoming a mirror for each of our own journeys. His ascension was not an end, but a beginning, the legacy of a path to liberation that echoes to this very day. The truth Elijah revealed on Mount Carmel, and which he lived until his transcendence, is that ultimate power resides not in a distant, controlling God, nor in empty rituals, but in the divine spark that pulses within every human being. Elijah's fire prayer is not a magic formula, but the activation of this spark, the resonance with the pleroma that allows us to burn away illusions and manifest true reality. In a world where official narratives continue to imprison us in limiting belief systems, where fear and ignorance are tools of control, Elijah's message is more relevant than ever. We live in an age where the matrix of material reality has become more complex, with its digital archons and media illusions. The pursuit of Gnosis today is the search for truth amidst the noise, the quest for authenticity in a sea of superficiality. The drought we face is not just a lack of rain, but the spiritual barrenness of a society disconnected from its divine essence. Elijah invites us to ask, what is your Mount Carmel? What are the modern Baals you worship, the illusions that prevent you from seeing the truth? Is it rampant consumerism, the incessant pursuit of external validation, blind submission to ideologies that promise salvation but deliver only another form of imprisonment? The fire prayer today is the courageous act of looking within, of recognizing the divine spark that resides in you, and of using the fire of consciousness to burn away everything that does not serve your true liberation. It is the understanding that you don't need intermediaries to connect with the divine, for the divine already resides within you. This Gnostic narrative of Elijah is not about changing your faith, but about expanding your perception. It's about understanding that true prayer is an act of self-knowledge, an inner journey that reveals your own divinity. The fire that descended on Mount Carmel is the same fire that can ignite your own Gnosis, illuminating the path out of the labyrinth of illusion. The transformation Elijah experienced is not a privilege of the few, but a possibility for all who dare to seek truth beyond appearances. So the final question remains. Are you ready to pray like Elijah? Not to a distant God, but to the divine, spark residing within your own being. Are you ready to invoke the fire of Gnosis and watch the heavens move, not out there but within you? Elijah's journey is an invitation to awaken, to break free from the chains of ignorance, and to embrace the fullness of who you truly are. The fire is waiting. You just need to ignite it. What will you do with this truth? The choice, as always, is yours.